Welcome to the Sales versus Marketing podcast, where we speak with sales, marketing, and business leaders. I'm your host, Scott, and today we are speaking with Darragh Grove-White. Now, Darragh is a career marketer. He currently is. He just actually left his last firm to start his own digital marketing company, This One Marketing, based out of British Columbia, Canada. So Darragh is an extremely successful marketer. He started actually his career in sales and then transitioned into marketing. He literally wrote the book on sales psychology and selling, human interaction and body language. And then he went on to be wildly successful as a brand strategist, digital marketing strategist, and general marketing director at TEDx Victoria, moving into another firm, LJ Welding and Automation. He built out their digital marketing campaign from the ground up and ran a successful career as a director of marketing there before transitioning into his own firm, where he is currently the founder and CEO. Darragh has a unique blend of both the psychology and human drivers of what actually facilitates and helps people decide to make a purchase, combined with the understanding of messaging and brand from a marketer's perspective, as well as being very technical in nature. He understands how to leverage digital marketing, growth hacking, and emerging marketing techniques to really bring a brand to the next level and get the most dollar value or ROI on their ad spend or marketing spend. So Darragh Grove-White is an extremely interesting marketer. His background, he's been very successful in a variety of different fields that all lend cadence to why he's doing so well right now. So Darragh, take it away. Give us a little bit more information about your background, what you're doing now, and what brought you to where you are today.
So I am a digital strategist that helps my clients engage decision makers, inform stakeholders, and mobilize grassroots resources. So that's like the 35,000 foot view, if you will.
Yeah.
And I do that through marketing strategies and growth hacking tactics. Basically, out of a frustration for the big companies like Google and Facebook and stuff like that, I get a deep pleasure from gaming their systems because how we never gave permission to have our data weaponized against us. And so I get a deep gratification from returning the favor to them by exploiting their vulnerabilities.
And so, okay, so let's talk about. So that's great. So that's a very cool perspective. Actually, I've never heard a marketer say that, but it's very true. So I appreciate where you're coming from, because I think a lot of people are on the hate the FANG companies right now. So
Facebook.
yeah. So where did you come from? Because now you are the founder CEO of This One Marketing, correct?
That's this one. Yeah.
This one. Okay. So where did you come from? What's your background?
Oh, I have a sales background, actually, not unlike yourself. That ever since I was 16, I was actually 15, I was doing sales. So my first job was actually, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, and it's probably weird to put it on the record, but my first real job was selling credit cards to Americans back when I was a kid. I didn't know what I was doing, and after I kind of realized, this is probably not a good thing, I ended up leaving that to do sales telemarketing at another place called the Buy and Sell newspaper in Toronto, which I don't even think exists anymore now. But
I don't think so, no. But
yeah, just generally newspapers. But I have this background in sales that then got accentuated through a curiosity in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, which I think most salespeople would be familiar with. Mm-hmm. Just like the cognitive biases, the unconscious shortcuts that we are constantly taking when we're learning information that I was really curious about, and I did a lot of studying, and all the while I did terribly in school, like real bad, like failed more math classes than anybody I know.
I was also not so great at math. So.
And it's when you're going through it at the time, you don't always have the perspective of like, hey, maybe it's not your fault.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a problem with the system. Maybe there's the way it's being
Well,
taught.
that's a whole other can of worms that extends far outside the context of driving revenue for companies. But yes, I do believe that people that are entrepreneurial by nature, which obviously you are, you're like a self learner. You learn a certain way, and you're always trying to learn more and more and more and more and grow. I think that that doesn't always work with the way that schools teach over information. Um,
So,
so yeah, I've your story is not so uncommon.
yeah. And it was actually it was because of the those failures that I think it ended up making me way stronger in the long run. The just knowing failure and constantly like having to redo things,
Hmm.
it's yeah, just eventually it makes your skin stronger. I unfortunately I had to kind of figure out who I was and what my real strengths were and stuff like that. And that obviously that takes time. But after I dropped out of school, I got into fights, sold drugs, stuff like that when I was a kid. But I eventually went back to school. Had a bit of a kind of a life perspective change, and I wanted to become a doctor like my dad and my grandparents and stuff like that.
How old are
So,
you here when you're just to put a little context around it?
so I would have been 20 when I went back to high school after I
Okay.
dropped out for a few years to get in trouble and get into fights and that kind of thing. But so I ended up going back to school, and I did so bad at science and math, as I mentioned earlier. But I ended up finishing high school as an adult, and then I left to come back to Victoria to do university because I wanted to go into medicine. But the truth was, I thought I was terrible at chemistry and physics and stuff. So after some soul searching, and I was doing a lot of volunteering at a hospital too,
Hmm.
um, I realized I could still help people by going into business. In fact, I might even be able to help more people and still get to acknowledge that part of who I wanted to become. You know what I mean?
I do. I think that's it's very powerful, and it's a perspective that I've never really thought of before. But at the end of the day, if you are truly good at what you do, it's because you do want to help people. And I don't think people even realize that because it becomes so routine. But if, even I'm thinking back to when I first started selling, and some of my proudest moments were seeing a customer, like after they've purchased something or whatever, just like smile on their face. Like I've worked in one of my first jobs. Well, actually, not my first job, but one of my jobs when I was younger, when I was still in high school, was in retail. And it's like it's such a simple job that people take for granted. But when you actually solve a problem, or when you deliver like that customer experience that you can tell they've never received from somebody in a store before, it's like a very heartwarming feeling. And I think that extrapolated times 1,000 to when you're selling large enterprise and you solve organizational issues for customers, you still have that feeling of, wow, I've done good. And I think that unfortunately, a lot of people associate sales with negative and, pushing solutions down people's throats that they don't need, or trying to manipulate them into buying. Anyone who's good at selling can never maintain, like, they don't, first of all, they don't sell like that, but anyone who's good at selling doesn't sell like that, because if you do sell like that, that is a stressor on yourself that you cannot maintain in perpetuity. So if you are good at selling, you generally are doing good for people,
Yeah.
and you feel good about it, which is why people are career salesmen. It's not because they love, ruining people's days and, making them commit to things and nobody wants to get somebody to commit to something and then have them coming back later and yelling and then escalate. Like, that's not a life that anybody actually wants to live. So when you actually do something good,
Yeah.
um, yeah, you feel real damn good about it. And like what you're saying, I've never thought about it like that, but yeah, there's another way to do good for people, and if you can sort of tap into that, I
Yeah.
think you're onto something.
I mean, to the point about like in the retail sales experience, to give someone an unexpected positive interaction when you go beyond what their expectations of the sales process was supposed to be, for them to walk away feeling like not only was there an external solution, but there was an internal thing that happened as well.
Hmm.
It wasn't just a transaction; there was a change or a transformation.
Yeah, that's very powerful. I like that perspective a lot, and that's not something I've actually ever I've heard when I've spoken to people about sales or marketing. But I really really like that perspective. It's really refreshing that you've acknowledged that. Okay, so you wanted to do good by people, but you realized, okay, your forte was not medicine, or at least getting the pre-qualifications required
Yeah.
to practice medicine, which is fine. Um, God knows I
More
couldn't go back to school for another 4, 6, 8 years.
yeah, exactly. So I still ended up volunteering in a hospital every week for the next 4 or 6, I guess it was 8 years in total, taking on an elderly guy with disabilities. We'd go to the mall. He didn't have any family to visit him. So I was matched up with him as a visitor companion. And we'd go to the mall and have like Tim Hortons coffee. And because he was stuck in a wheelchair, it was basically the thing he'd get to look forward to every week.
Yeah.
And it's little things like that where you get to make such a big difference in people's lives that it's oddly enough, it's very motivating. If you're familiar with Viktor Frankl's Man's
Yeah.
Search for Meaning, being able to be in touch with purpose and tangibly experience it on a regular basis is it's like was it Zig Ziglar who said motivation is like bathing, you have to do it every day.
I don't know that quote, but I like it though.
Okay, yeah. So, but anyway, I ended up writing an ebook on body language for persuasion. So just to kind of bring it to the how the heck did I get here with gaming, social media, and search engines and stuff like that. So I wrote this ebook that took me 3 years, and it was on body language and a combination of neurolinguistic programming, basically persuasion stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which, kind of in the big picture of things, marketing and sales, we're ultimately talking about persuasion, right? Just on a micro and a macro.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wrote the book. I did the Amazon publishing, and frankly, I didn't sell very many books, like I think a lot of people. And this was one of the many failures that I can look back on and credit to why and where I got to because of it. Another example was when I was a big brother for Big Brothers Big Sisters. Joey, my little, he and I did a fundraising campaign to raise $10,000 to build a school in China. That's where he wanted to build a school. I said, sure, no problem, let's do it. And we did this micro crowdfunding thing where you reach out to 35 people in your network and say for $3 a day for 3 months, we all put our money together and we build a school for $10,000. Now, I thought this was like a sure shot thing. Like this was for sure going to happen. We're going to build a school and it's going to be amazing. And we do these like personal 1-minute videos, him and Joey and me, to the people that I invite to join this campaign. And we only get like 3 or 4 people that donated $300 each, which is still a lot of money.
But it's not enough to build a school in China.
Enough to build a school in China. And, at the time, I remember on Facebook letting my network know, hey, we're doing something exciting. But there's actually something I've never really talked publicly about. But after that, I never really followed up with my network about how everything went because there was kind of an embarrassment that we didn't do it right. And I felt like I'm supposed to be this kid's role model, and I kind of failed in terms of like building the school, or at least that's how I thought about it. And I was a bit embarrassed. And I realized, like, obviously in retrospect, the fact that we even raised over $1,000 in the first place is actually pretty good. And for Joey, who comes from like poverty, unfortunately, like this was a really big deal. So my perspective being like, hey, we didn't meet the 10,000. And then Joey's like, wow, that's a lot of money.
Raise $1,000, yeah.
Which was still, but this was another marketing failure, frankly, that I experienced. And another one was when I was in student politics and I lost by 8 votes, and there was a lot more than 8 votes. I think it was like several hundred, but that was another marketing communications or persuasion failure that made me realize that there's a lot to be learned here. And they say failure is the best teacher.
Yeah.
So
I think what's really interesting is you literally wrote a book on on psychology and how to persuade people, but your lessons learned weren't just from researching and learning. It was the actual failures that are prompting you to sort of learn and grow. Even though you literally wrote the book on how to do it, it's like you still had to fail to learn how to do it, which I think is such a strong indicator of how important it is to fail, but to take those learnings and to move on to the next level, next stage.
Yeah. I mean, they call it, there's recycling and then there's upcycling. And this is an example of like, okay, I junked it, but I can upcycle it into something better.
I like that. Yeah.
So those intimate and personal and public failures, to lose an election by 8 votes and have people tell you, hey, they voted for you, and how did it go? And constantly saying, well, I lost, or the building a school, just for it to be so public and to be vulnerable and to fail and to still keep trying, that was a test of character too. I mean, or at least a trial of character.
I agree. I think they always say that if you want to hold yourself accountable to something, you put it out in the open and you make it public. So to continue to do that and to continue to fail but grow. And I think that fail is a harsh word. So like you said, it's all about perspective. Yeah. So how many people took 3 years and successfully published a book? Yeah, maybe you didn't sell so many, but how many people haven't been able to finish a book? An example for, your big brothers, your little, he thought $1,000 was a ton of money. Totally. So it still is perspective, which is actually sort of speaking more to your personality as somebody who expects high things and expects yourself to deliver more than your actual quote unquote failures. In my opinion, at least, I think it's more a testament to your incredible personality as opposed to your lack of being able to succeed, because in some people's mind, you did succeed several times. But
it's our standards that we hold ourselves to. That, I mean, well, think about it this way: if I considered those successes, this is just a thought experiment. But if I did, would I have kept trying as hard because I didn't interpret it as a rejection or a failure?
Good point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's okay. So, all right. So lessons learned. So where are we now? So continue the story.
So I realized that there's a lot of people like me out there that wrote a book or that produced the great thing, and that there was no audience for it, right? Mm-hmm. That there's a disconnect between creator and distribution, a big one, a dramatic one, actually. In fact, like I've created some how-tos of how to basically get your video indexed properly for search engines, because there's so many great videographers out there. And so much great content out there that just doesn't get any traction because people don't understand the indexing process, the distribution process, how that really works. They just think that once you make that great content, it'll get found, and that's just not the case. So with those failures like the ones I've described, or at least a couple of them, it was creating stuff is only half the battle. The other half is like figuring out, okay, who am I creating this stuff for? As a sales and marketing professional, you have to know your audience. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do good communication. So
how did you learn, or how did, I guess you've learned throughout your career, but how did you learn how to bridge that gap?
I would say that, after finishing my university degree in business, just as I was finishing it, I did a HubSpot certification on inbound marketing. Mm-hmm. And that was an introduction for me on a very serious change that's going through the marketing industry, where, legacy media is all about interruptive marketing, where it interrupts your experience, negative user experience, but we're used to it, right? Like think radio, commercials, newspaper ads, things that, kind of get in your way, versus like great lead generation, where you're you're putting out the breadcrumbs for people to find how to solve their problem, and then to know who to go to for that. So there was a paradigm shift with the HubSpot inbound marketing course that I took. That was really helpful. In fact, I created a marketing director position for the industrial automation company I was working with for about 5 years. So I created a position out of what was originally just a sales job, a marketing, and I built a marketing department.
Was it a case of them not understanding the value of inbound marketing because it was more of a legacy industry?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're very much a legacy industry in that oil and gas was their main customer, and they were one of the first to get into paid ads, like back 10 years ago, and they didn't think they had to do much different. And because it's a slower to change industry, there just wasn't an urgency. It wasn't a tech company like, say, like a SaaS company or something like that, where it's very cutting edge and technologically driven.
So this is great because you created the position because you saw the opportunity because of your experience. How did you build out and how did you walk this legacy organization through a digital transformation in the marketing arena? Because that's essentially what your job was. It was bringing them up to speed. So walk us through that.
Well, if I think probably one of the most valuable nuggets of this process was to frame when you're doing something that's going to potentially have a big impact or a big change, and it threatens people's normal way of doing things and their comfort level. Instead of calling it what it is, a big change, reframing it for people to get buy-in, because this is one of the hardest parts about it, is getting your change management.
Well, I was actually going to ask you about managing up because I know that I'm sure you encountered pushback. So, but continue. Sorry.
Often and regularly, but this one little hack. Well, for anybody listening that is feeling challenged by senior leadership in that they don't feel empowered to do their jobs because senior leadership is saying, "Hold on, I'm not on board with this yet." The trick is call it a pilot project. It takes the edge out of it. It makes it. It even gets them on board with wanting to experiment too. But obviously, you don't want them to mess with your experiment. So you say, "Hey, that's a great idea. Let's put that on the list of projects that we can also experiment with as a pilot. But this is going to be separate from your pilot, right?" But to get people excited about change, this little hack: call it a pilot. Call it a pilot project, because it doesn't feel like as much of a risk. You feel like you're able to take experiments,
and then you show them the value, and you show them the ROI, or you show them the increased brand awareness or MQLs, whatever KPI or metric you're. So I like that. That's because managing up, like you said, is by far the most difficult thing to do.
Oh, and a changing of the guard that's happening, or at least has been happening for the last 6 years. As the baby boomer generation starts to, retire and younger generations are taking on leadership positions, there's still some of the older dogs out there that barely use email properly,
Yeah.
And although they have a wealth of experience and knowledge, they're unfortunately the way that they've always been doing things interferes with the way that things could be done better.
Mm-hmm. So you started sort of optimizing and augmenting this company's marketing presence. Is that? Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So basically this would end up becoming my whole business process as a marketer. But the at least the first part, which I think will answer your question, is, well, how do you do that? The first thing is to identify what are your KPIs. What is your real strategy? Who are you trying to reach? What are your business goals? In the case of this company, it was getting more leads. getting more website visitors to engage on site, to convert, right? These were, at the time, we thought social media was an important KPI, which, to some degree it still is, but it's not really for this company. But how many followers, just basically getting all your key performance indicators. I keep saying, guys, I should stop using jargon for those who just, but yeah, figuring out what are the key business goals, and then get baselines. You don't know how many leads you get per month. Okay, well, today we're going to get that.
Yeah.
You know how much the customer acquisition cost is through paid social. Okay, let's get a benchmark for it. You can't improve what you're not measuring.
So do you think that because some of these things, it's so funny. For some people listening, this is like, how do you operate a business without these KPIs? It doesn't make sense. You're just flying blindly. So do you see this a lot with companies, without singling out companies, but with companies you work with as a consultant? Do you see that people don't even set those KPIs and they're just kind of spending money here, there, everywhere, hoping that business comes in, no rhyme, reason, understanding?
100%. The nice thing about when you frame it as a pilot, you're able to get the parameters set up so that you know what you're looking for. You and I have probably seen this a lot, that advertising is a big black hole for a lot of people. It's just a big money pit if you don't have the parameters set up for, like, what are your goals for everything, and yeah, it's bonkers how many big companies actually don't have a good grasp on those key metrics, and it's unfortunately, I think that it breeds mediocrity. Because it's no longer objective, or it's not yet objective. If someone's doing a good job, it's all subjective. It's like, hey, I like the way that looks, so let's run it.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, the market research group says, hey, this is definitely a better converting message. Let's run with that as a test, right?
I think that that's why you're seeing some companies, the lifespan of a CMO or a chief marketing officer is getting shorter and shorter as they start measuring these KPIs against the campaigns they run. And I think that, the lifespan of a VP sales is already between 16 to 18 months in a large company. But I think the CMO is catching up, as they're not properly able to show ROI or return on investment for ad dollars spent, or whatever KPI, because now there's so many tools that you can use to measure these things, whereas there wasn't all. So maybe in larger businesses, we're seeing this shift, probably more predominant, obviously, because they have the money to spend on all these analytics insights tools, and they know how to use them, and they can probably hire the talent that can say, listen, this guy's ineffective. Whereas some of the smaller companies may still be flying blind if they don't have that understanding. They can be making good money, but if the founder is not a marketing individual, and you're hiring a firm that isn't transparent, then he could be spending, or she could be spending, quite a bit of money, and it could still be a black hole. So,
yeah.
Is that how you differentiate yourself when you work with companies?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we're doing this baseline thing, there's a huge education component, right? Like being able to talk about SEO is one of my specialties, and so explaining how SEO works. What's basically, similarly when I talk about like growth hacking different platforms, you got to understand the philosophy behind how it was created and how it works and why it works the way it does. And then you can start finding out the ways that it's exploitable, right? And so with clients, a lot of people unfortunately get taken in marketing. It seems to be one of those things that there's a lot of charlatans out there. There's a lot of people that say they know how to do things, and there's just it's disappointing, because I've seen people that overpay for marketing all the time because they just don't know. They're getting mystified by jargon rather than having things explained in really simple terms. So marketing is unfortunately it has the potential to be abused. I mean,
well, I think even like traffic, like if you look at the total amount of traffic on the internet, there's some ridiculous stats out there that like 50 to 60% of the total traffic on the internet is all bots and all fake and not real traffic. And how do you combat that? So okay, so that's a great question. How would a company know what to look for when they're hiring somebody, a firm or an individual within their organization, so that they can be more effective and they can measure the results?
What should they look for when
Is there I guess best practices, or could there be tools that they could use? Uh, that's sort of like the pathway that I'm going down a little bit, because you're speaking about how opaque marketing is. How do they make it more transparent?
Okay. So, like, what would be a good litmus test
Yes, yeah,
on,
yeah, exactly.
when interviewing marketing professionals?
That sounds like a good way to phrase my question.
Be a good litmus test. It would be how quickly and how soon they ask about the customer versus what they think is good marketing. So how customer obsessed they are, or how marketing segment obsessed they are.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's no shortage. There's a big difference between tacticians and strategists. Right? Strategists are the big picture. Tacticians are the like technicians. They're good at its specific skills versus understanding how does this all work together. Right? And when it comes to good marketers, it's how good are their questions about your target market? Like, how obsessed are they about understanding them versus selling you on their services?
So when you work with a company and you're going in fresh, what are the benchmarks that you try and tick off in terms of if you're trying to identify their buyer persona or their target market, or like what is like the baseline strategy that you would implement, or is it all customized depending on who your client is?
It has to be like, I think it has to be really, I mean, although you can systematize and you should just for efficiency, it really, it needs to be about who you're trying to market to and the detail, the level of research you've done to do that, right? Because you're actually going to get some of your best call to actions. You're going to get some of your best landing page copy. You're going to get some of the best verbiage that your potential customer is going to respond well to by doing the research, by doing surveys, by doing interviews about the day that they committed to buying your product. What was going on that day for them? Like getting a wide picture,
like a holistic, like, like 360-degree view of
yeah.
who your customer. And is there a more effective way to do that? Outside of, is there like is it arming your sales team or your sales force with the right questions? Is it asking, for example, in my past, what I found effective to get some sentiment from customers is to ask them why they chose to buy a product as a follow-up email right after they've purchased it.
That's a
And
great, yeah. Yep.
and the reason why I've done that is because that's a meaningful point in the customer buying cycle. They're enthusiastic, they're excited, and they like your company, they love your company. They just signed, right? So they're going to give you reasons as to why they buy. And then what I've tried to do is I've tried to include the verbiage that they use or the features that they highlight in the marketing material. But that's one example. So is there other ways that you can really tie into the customer?
Yeah, so I think this is probably kind of what you're saying. But one of the, like, for a person listening right now that has landing pages and thank you pages and stuff like that, one quick, easy, actionable would be whatever your thank you page is. That should, there's really two great ways of using your thank you page. One is have a survey, like you say, like literally as soon as possible, once they've converted, find out what was it that worked for them. What is it? What are their expectations? Because this is going to give you an idea of both how to segment or bucket them on different messaging, automated email, drip campaigns, and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But also the other great thing for your thank you page when you're in terms of like fully using the opportunity would be to have educational information about the product that gets them more hyped on what they're about to get. Like it could be frequently asked questions in the form of a video,
Yeah.
to get them kind of amped up.
Yeah.
It's even another great use of a thank you page is to validate the decision to have converted the previous step.
Mm-hmm.
So show testimonials, show them brands that have also,
and not just before they're buying, like reinforce after. Yeah,
exactly. Get them, help them get a cognitive bias that they made the right decision. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's all very good. I wanted to ask you one more thing because you mentioned that you're an SEO, your next SEO expert, specialist, whichever. So the debate obviously for a company is, where should we spend our dollars? Should we spend it on paid or should we spend it on organic? What are your thoughts on which channel is best?
Well, I think you'll probably agree with this. You split test it and let the data decide. I don't think it should be one or the other. It should be both, and it should be consistent. Marketing has a compound effect. It pays in compound interest, right? Like your fantastic content you put out there, yeah, you post it in a week, it's probably not going to turn into any business, but over time, it has a compound effect, right? So if you have very short-term, tight deadlines, you're probably going to have to put more effort into paid ads to get the traffic. But if you're building a company to succeed in the long run, you have to be doing organics. You have to be doing great content too. It's not one or the other. In fact, with a lot of startups, they don't necessarily have the budget to do both, and they have to do organic for the most part, and they have to save that paid budget for conversions and direct ROI activities.
But I think it's also, you mentioned startups too, and that's a really good point. Like, you have to figure out what your messaging is, what your brand is, what your value prop is, or you're just throwing money down the toilet. So it's very important to map those things out first and to hit those benchmarks before you start spending money, because that's not going to be the answer if you don't know what your actual product is.
For sure. And one of the things I learned a couple of things I learned in entrepreneurship, my school program was, one is called a smoke test, or a fire test, smoke test. And basically what that is you run Facebook ads to see if there is actually demand based on who clicks them. So it's an interesting way of testing headlines and that kind of stuff, and testing, is there even a demand for this offer? And the other thing from that specialization was to figure out your minimum viable product first before you put a whole bunch of money into it. If it's at its very basic level of a value prop, if it's making money, then it's worth tweaking and improving. But if you haven't been able to make money come out of it, by putting more and more money into it, it's a huge risk, right?
Yeah.
But if you've already proven your minimum viable product, your MVP, then you can put more money into it. But if you haven't proved it yet, you're essentially risking a great deal.
Yeah. No, that's very good. Okay, so I'm trying to think of where I want to take this. I think what I'd like to do, just because you've worked with a variety of different companies, I want to get your insights on the worst practices that you see in marketing across the industry. What are things that you see are very prevalent now that you think are detrimental to a company's success?
It's very prevalent now that.
So it could be a practice. It could be a trend that you see that may not be.
I would say advertisements that don't add value. People, I would say that cold calling and cold emailing and cold texting is a big no-no, and it actually has the potential to work in reverse. So take the example of the recent election we had here in Canada. I don't know how it was over in Toronto, but I was getting phone calls and text messages from all political parties all the time. I don't know even how they got my information. And the NDP was actually probably the biggest culprit, oddly enough. But it was interruptive and it was invasive. Mm-hmm. And although this is a political campaigning thing, it's using the same type of marketing tactics that a lot of businesses use.
Yeah.
I didn't ask for the service that you're knocking on my door,
Yeah.
interrupting me, sending me calls I didn't ask for. And there's so much of that, and it seems to be getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to do. And that should be a warning. It's like email marketing, cold emailing. It's because it's getting cheaper to do, it's becoming less and less and less effective.
And I think that this whole like spray and pray type mentality where none of the messaging is customized. Obviously, whoever's reaching out to you just doesn't give a about your business or you. It's a turnoff. Because I would argue that if somebody did reach out to me cold and they knew about me and they knew about my business and they knew about my problems, I would be receptive to that. Much more so. I may not buy from him. I have no idea. But much more so than a generic, especially God forbid, a political campaign message, which is like who wants that? Really, who wants that?
Yeah. Well, it's they're not respecting your time if they haven't actually looked into who you are. So what is Scott about?
Yeah.
What based on what Scott's putting out there, what does he care most about?
Yeah.
If I'm not able to add value to Scott's audience in a podcast, then I need to rethink what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
Right? Because just to use that as an example.
No, I agree. And you know what? Even like one of the first things when we first jumped on this call, you were mentioning, I've been putting out this podcast and I've been really focusing on putting out content and personal branding because that's, as an individual, I think that's very important to build your almost like your professional persona. And it's the same thing that I tell businesses when I work with businesses or when I work with my own company. You have to build out this persona online, and a lot of people don't even do that properly. But you mentioned a couple of points about different things that I haven't done yet that could be very valuable. And like these are things that I've been thinking through, but what I'm looking at, what I'm trying to do because you've done like 5 seconds of research before we jumped on the call. And then all of a sudden you're 10x more relevant than anyone else who I've spoken to, just because you've done that small little bit and it's like so impactful, and it takes really no effort. But the second you start caring about somebody, it shows and I think it's sad that it shows so much. But the reason why it shows so much is because so few people actually do it. So when somebody does do it, it really stands out.
100%. And that I think you came full circle around like how I think that there is a problem today, and it's that there's a lack of putting the time in to make your message personal, to make it not feel like it's a mass-produced, disingenuous.
Yeah,
it's really it's putting the time in and showing that you care. What do they say that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care?
Yes.
Is that it?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Just all of these bugs, but the heart of it is still there. No, and in fact, just as kind of a side point, when I was looking more at the cool stuff that you've been working on, I increasingly I was like, well, I actually have a lot of questions I have for him. I don't know if I want to be talking all the time. I want to hear what you're doing, and because you're clearly doing a lot of things right.
Yeah, thank you. But
this podcast, I don't know how many people, your average audience, but my takeaway is that you're creating a lot of value. You're giving a lot of insight, and you're giving a really nice palette of different taste.
That's always been, it's funny. So to answer your question, it's about 500 downloads per episode right now,
wow.
on average. And I've only been doing this for 3-4 weeks now, the podcast. Now, keep in mind that I did double down and build a huge audience on LinkedIn, and I was running a website where I had contributors writing articles, and that already had about 1,000 people per day looking at articles on my website before I launched the podcast. So this is not like putting it into the world day one type thing. Like there was already a very heavy focus on business, and that was like my target audience, because I knew that eventually, like I mentioned before, like when I first started doing this, I was doing consulting work. So I was trying to find clients, and it was obviously mostly marketing. So I was speaking about marketing and sales and trying to add value that way. But now it's sort of built out. So the second I put out something that's geared towards that audience, it definitely does have a little bit of momentum and traction. So, so that's really where it's at now. I can't remember the second part of your question. I apologize. But I think you were just about like putting this stuff out there. And you asked the second part that I totally forget.
I think you and I have a similar business philosophy in that, like, you try and help as many people as possible.
Yes,
and
generalized.
It always comes back. It really does. Even if that person that you've helped or those many people, they may not directly, return the favor, so to speak. But the more people you help, just the more likely good things will propagate.
I agree. So I'm a big fan, and I hate to plug him so often, but Gary Vaynerchuk. So I subscribe to his content creation and educational philosophy. Nothing that I do is gated. I don't charge for anything. I don't run webinars. I don't host master classes. I'm not pretending to be some online guru, business guru, and I can name a couple that I don't really enjoy because I find them shady as whatever. But I think that too many people putting out educational resources online, unfortunately, don't monetize it the right way, or I think they think that they're better than they are, and they're charging $5,000 for courses or $2,000 for webinar. Listen, I know everybody wants to make a buck, but right now, luckily, I'm fortunate enough to be working full time. So this is just something that I do as a hobby, and I don't need to charge for it. So I like I like putting the stuff that I've learned through my career out there, and I think I have value because I've sort of seen success in the strategies that I've implemented throughout my different businesses and companies I've worked for. But also the whole purpose of this podcast is to extract sort of the same type of just best practices, because so many people have great stories, and a lot of people, I've listened to a couple podcasts and I find that they're very pigeonholed, or they're very narrow in scope. So I listened to one, it's about sales leaders, and I listened to another one, it's about channel partners, and it's so specific. And I think for me, I'm just creating content that I would enjoy and I would consume if I was younger in my career, and I just wanted to learn things about business in general. I want to learn what a marketer does. I want to learn what somebody who goes and starts his own marketing firm, entrepreneur. I want to learn what a consultant does. I want to learn about corporate culture and why it's important. I want to learn about sales. Like, I want to learn all these different things. And I just hope that I can sort of help facilitate that by finding people that tell it. So that's really, and there's no, I don't do this to sell to somebody. It's really just because I enjoy it. Yep. This is a kind of a nerdy hobby, but
I bet you get a lot of great feedback from people like, hey, that last episode you did about what to watch out for when hiring.
Yeah.
Like, I never thought about that. Like,
yeah,
people that always blame other people or something like that. Yeah, we definitely like red flag that rather than, or what,
Yeah. So little things like that. So anyway, I appreciate it. That's very kind that they mentioned that. So I hope that there's some value.
I'm a chance to support what you're doing, and I'm happy to be here to have this chat. And also, I look forward to staying in touch after this. And
for sure. Well, your story, I really do appreciate your story, and I didn't know your entire story before we spoke, and now it's even more impactful to me knowing like all the different steps you took, because some people their story is not so interesting, right? Some people they're very brilliant in what they do, but they're like, oh yeah, I went to Stanford and I got an MBA, and now I'm like an SVP sales at a global tech company, and I'm like, okay, well, like, good for you, and I'm sure like you're incredibly bright, but there's something about somebody who had to go through shit and just like figure it out and then come out on the other side being as knowledgeable as you are is very impressive, because obviously it wasn't a linear road. And I think that kind of person is somebody who I enjoy speaking with, because there's a lot of depth to that person, and they bring different perspective to the table as opposed to somebody who just had like a very, one way straight path to success. And I really do think long term, it's, again, failures add value to somebody.
It makes us more dynamic.
Yeah.
And on top of it, we, depending on how wide your interests are, and I think you're probably very similar, we get the advantage of divergent thinking, being able to have very different bodies of information, but being able to put it together in such a way that you've got a new idea again.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's wrap this up, because it's been going on for a little bit. So I don't want to drag out the whole podcast, but I do want to capture a couple more things
Of course.
before I close off, because it's been a really good conversation. Uh, if you were going to tell your 20-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Don't actually no. State in the positive.
Okay.
Remain flexible of what the future can look like. I was pretty convinced I was going to be a doctor, and that this was going to be the way that I could make a gift of my life. But it very much wasn't. In fact, one thing I didn't mention, where I volunteer now, it's a couple times a month. I volunteer at Victoria Hospice.
Mm-hmm.
I get to hang out with dying people. I get to be of service and help the nurses, help the family members, help feeding, stuff like that. And I'm still able to acknowledge that part of who I wanted to be as a doctor without actually having to go to medical school. So so I'm still able to honor that part of myself. And if I knew that was even possible back then, I think it would have helped me be more flexible in general.
You probably would have taken a lot of weight off your shoulders and like stressors in terms of where you're going to end up in life. If you understood that life was not so black and white.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of young people, especially when they're going to colleges and universities, they think they have to do this program. They don't realize that actually flexibility is greater strength than rigidity.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. If you were going to speak to somebody and give them some resources, so it could be people that you like to learn from, or it could be books, audibles, podcasts, where do you go as a resource for information to grow professionally, personally, whichever?
Yeah. So obviously my friends.
Yeah.
One place. I have mentors. But in terms of like day to day, if we take that Zig Ziglar, or whatever the quote about motivation needing to happen daily, I think that education and inspiration should be on a daily basis too. So although I don't do podcasts as much, what I have been doing is it's called Blinkist, and they're book summaries. They're about between 12 and 20-minute audio book summaries of books that are. So I'm able to get like this roughly maybe 5 books a week, synopsis, but a little more detailed than that, to be able to mull new ideas. Like,
is that not Scribd? Because Scribd has something like that.
It could be.
Okay.
Okay. I think it's totally worth it if you're like myself. I'm a little slower a reader actually, and that's why audiobooks are another thing I do. Audible, big fan of that. But I also do Blinkist because it's like the book of the day for me. I get to. I remember one of the first ones I did was a book called Anti-Fragile, and it was a really because it's such a big, broad idea that you can have a thing that's anti-fragile. That the more you try and break it, the stronger it becomes. It's a whole new way of looking, or a whole new filter of how to. So, being able to be exposed to new ideas from people who have spent years researching their books and stuff, and to almost daily have exposure to new ideas, that's huge. So I would say Blinkist is good. Audible, I love it. I'm a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk as well.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm glad he moved away from the hustle porn.
Yes, I agree.
Because I think there maybe was something a bit disingenuous for me about it. I don't think that the harder you work, the better things are going to become. In fact, this is a bit of a paradox, but I find that the more I work on the inside of myself, the more my outside world changes. Right? I think that's it's an interesting view, and I'm not in disagreement of it, but it's hard to teach someone that. I think it's something that a lot of people have to discover on their own. I'm sure there's probably effective ways to teach it. I don't know them, but like for instance, things like meditation. That would be an example of doing the internal work, learning how to become more patient or compassionate, or seeking to be better at understanding. Those things, when we work on the inside, the way that our world around us changes. Rumi, a sophist poet, we may be familiar with, he essentially said those words. He's like, the wise man, or pardon me, the young man goes out to try and change the world, but the wise man changes himself, and the world around him changes. And that's true on multiple levels. So coming back to the hustle porn, the older Gary Vaynerchuk stuff, it's better to focus on process than on product. And I think the hustle porn thing was about product all the time, rather than as you improve your process, your product automatically improves.
Yeah, no, very good. Is there anything that I didn't touch on that you wanted to discuss?
No, actually, like this has been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you taking the time. And it's a
likewise, man. It was a good talk. I like it.
Yeah. Well, I hope we get a chance to talk again. It doesn't have to be on a podcast, though.
No. Well, no. It doesn't. It doesn't have to be on a podcast. We can connect after. It's all good. No, I appreciate that. If people want to find you, where can they go? Do you have a website, LinkedIn?
Yep. LinkedIn. I'm growth hacker with 2 R's.
Okay.
Twitter, I barely use.
Okay.
Medium, I'm just starting to get on there. That was one of the reasons I was like, damn, he's doing some cool stuff I need to learn about.
Yeah, it's actually what you're referring to, if you're listening, I wrote a couple pieces for Hacker Noon. It was before they migrated their entire website, or most of their website, off Medium onto their own domain. I think that's where they're at right now, and I haven't submitted stuff in a while back. It's been about 2-3 months. But there's a couple pieces of mine on Hacker Noon and on the startup. And
how do you get in there? Like
I just submitted. I had one piece that did really well. It was on the open workplace. Basically no baffle, like everyone open space type startup. And it was just basically a commentary on why it's not as effective as a lot of people think it is. Right. And that piece did really well. And that I sent that to, I think his name's David Snook, I think the founder CEO of Hacker Noon. And he reached out to me and he said, submit it. And then I just kept submitting pieces from my Medium account, and they choose whether or not they allow them or they reject them. And yeah.
So, another question I have is, do you do any promotion and distribution yourself, or do you just write the content and they distribute it to their followers?
So how it works, Medium's changed a lot, so bear with me, because Medium also now has a paywall that allows Medium's editors to curate content and push it out. But when I was still writing for Hacker Noon, I didn't do anything myself. If I wanted to promote it, it would just be me, using, I use Buffer, but for social media, but I would just be pushing it out myself whenever I wanted. But they would take it and they would post it, and I think that they would actually choose the tags, if I'm not mistaken, or they would segment it into a certain category, and then they would also choose if it was like front page worthy. So it could be under Hacker Noon, but it may not be front page worthy, and it may not be newsletter worthy, because I also think they send out an email with their top stories. So I think I know that that's their editors that curate and pick. So there's like different thresholds of how well your article does on Hacker Noon, depending on if they like it or if it's relevant. They run series too. So there could be like a series they're trying to run. And if you write an article that fits into that series, then they'll promote that or whatnot. So so once you get it in there, then they choose how they want to promote it. There's no like paid option that you can pay for like an extra tier or something like that.
Right. Because I just recently got accepted to, I think it's called Noteworthy. It's a Medium publication.
Yes, I know it. Yeah.
And the guy reached out and said, "Hey, we'd love to, have you consider doing some writing." And I'd never had that before, and like I said, I'm pretty new to Medium. Now, there's a few kind of like black hat type tricks I was doing to get attention, like for instance, getting the social sharing component. So getting, I'm not sure if this is, this is useful information.
No, I think it's all good. It's all, listen, man, like this is. It doesn't matter. These are
trade secrets.
These are trade secrets. Fine. This is up to you. Whatever you want to talk about, however you expand your reach online, it's really your choice. But go ahead. Yeah.
To give a few kind of useful nuggets, because I came in strong talking about loving ripping off
Yes.
search engines, and so I'd like to offer some more insight.
Please do.
Because
This has been the best. By the way, this has been the most in-depth marketing conversation I've ever had. So, like, please continue. I really appreciate it.
oh, okay. So here's some kind of useful tactics that don't really take a lot of extra work. In fact, please reach out to me if there's anybody
Yes.
that wants to.
I'll link your info in the show notes.
But we can by getting things like social shares, like and social signals. They're like retweets and Facebook shares and all of these types of things. They trick the algorithm, whether it's Medium publication or Facebook or LinkedIn, into thinking that this is potentially viral content.
Yes.
Right? Because there's no way. I think it's for every minute of video uploaded to YouTube now, or for every minute, there's something like 40 hours of content. We don't have enough time to actually watch all the content.
No, of course not. No.
Because so much getting uploaded all the time, and it's not just YouTube; it's everywhere. So they have algorithms in place to be able to detect this might have viral potential because of the amount of engagement that a post gets in the first 15 minutes to hour, depending on the platform.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So by gaming them, by paying for likes and
it'll hit that algorithm and then it'll take off and be shown.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've heard of things like this, and there's different tools that can do this. I didn't know this existed with Medium, and I don't actually know how the different platforms interact with each other. So I don't know if YouTube can understand if, for example, this video has been retweeted 500 times, or if it's just the likes native to that platform or the comments that are native to that platform.
Well, I've done some really interesting experiments, like from my Airbnb listings by gaming them to get the highest visibility. Social networks have a combination of both their internal SEO, like you say, like within YouTube, say it's got its likes and comments, etc. But then it also has its external SEO. So how many Twitter shares of that YouTube video, or Facebook, or Pinterest, or so you wouldn't be able to fully game it just only taking one angle. So by getting a really comprehensive, it helps future-proof your SEO.
But you must have to know which, if you're going to do this, you must have to know which, what's the most optimal method of hitting this algorithm properly. So
you'd want to have it happen as quickly as possible within that first 15 minutes to first hour. We know with things like engagement pod technology that there's different ways to use that. You can have the 5-minute engage. You posted the post a while ago, but if you post a post recently, you'd want to have your engagements closer together. Right? Because that's going to help trick but if you posted this post, say, a month ago, then by flicking on your engagement tool to every 5 minutes, it looks a little more natural than all of a sudden it's just getting this burst, but there's no social shares associated with it. So it looks like a blip, an anomaly that they would say, hey, someone's trying to game us. So it's taking into account how they would be looking at it. So doing a whole bunch of social shares and then pumping a whole bunch of traffic through it be a good way of tricking them into thinking, hey, this is...
Have you actually mapped out like a process that's optimized for each platform?
I've been working on a few of them.
Very cool. Well, we don't have to record your trade secrets, but I think it's very cool.
Yeah, no, Quora is another one. In fact, for yourself, I'm not sure if you use it much.
I don't use it as much as, actually I don't use it at all, to be honest. I use it for content ideas. So sometimes I'll put out, so if you look at my LinkedIn, you'll see me answering questions all the time. So those are questions that I find on Quora, or they could be questions I find on LinkedIn. But if I don't have questions, I'll just go answer a question on Quora on video with my insight or perspective on it. And it's just easy for me to not have to think about new content. So, but I know that's not really the way you're supposed to use Quora. You're supposed to be answering the questions. But
well, no, that's a growth hack, right? It's being able to, and then another useful growth hack with Quora would be like using Google and seeing what the autocomplete is. and then you have a better idea of like what kind of good questions to be asking.
Yes.
That Quora may not be ready or not populated yet for.
That's
and
a
then
really
you
good
go
point.
Immediately answer it, pay for a bunch of upvotes,
Yeah.
and then your answer is permanently stuck to the top. You just have to make sure you have quality content.
Yes, of course.
Right? But
yeah,
it bypasses their system. And the trouble is, and maybe this is going to answer one of the other questions around misconceptions in the industry,
mm-hmm.
but a lot of people don't realize this is so easy to game, unfortunately. Like I just said with the core thing.
Yeah.
You get 30 upvotes for less than $10.
Yeah.
Right. And then you've not permanently, but you've locked in a pretty reliable traffic source for a question that your potential persona is asking. And people don't realize how easy this is and how everybody is gaming. All of your big influencers are doing gaming of some kind, gaming of the platforms they're on.
Yeah.
And if you don't think that that's true, like at one point I didn't realize that was true. You're going to have books like I did that never sold anything because I trusted I was when it was bad. It was bad information. A lot of people know the vulnerabilities of these platforms, and that's why many of them are on the top, right?
Yeah.
So it would be ignorant to deny that all of these platforms are gameable, and because there's so much great content that just doesn't get visible because people think.
No, it's unfortunate. Two points come to mind. I know a gentleman. This is in all seriousness not me because I have no idea how to do this, but I do know somebody that can guarantee an Amazon bestseller for a book or all. Like it depends on when you list it and a certain time, and like you can always get that bestseller again and again and again. So I know that that's a thing. I know that I was actually reading an article, and I don't remember the name of the gentleman. It was on LinkedIn, but he was going on about how all your favorite influencers are really just growth hackers that know how to exploit a certain system at a certain point. And it could be when the system is very immature and they haven't developed a very robust algorithm to avoid that kind of thing, or maybe
100%.
Yeah.
100%. So. The example with I talked about in one of my pieces of content. It's called bumping.
Mm-hmm.
I first heard about it on Facebook groups. Essentially, it's you comment under your post in a group, and then you delete the comment, and then you comment again and delete the comment, and do this repeatedly. And then it tricks Facebook because of the amount of engagement, all the comments.
Yeah.
It didn't recognize that you were deleting the comments. It just recognized that's were happening. And it would boost people's posts in Facebook groups, in private. And now this happened a few years ago, and I was just hearing about it, as often growth hacks happen.
Yeah.
Just as they were clamping down on it, they were figuring it out. I was like, oh great! I just found out it's too late. Plus, I didn't have Facebook groups. But I was on LinkedIn a few years ago, and I realized that actually I was able to get traffic in LinkedIn groups when they were a little more used, by doing bumping, because they didn't actually have a mechanism in place to prevent that type of gaming. So I was able to, and I had my special tracking URL, so I could see all the traffic that was coming to these, that was targeted in these groups, and it was lots. We're talking hundreds of clicks per post.
That's very powerful stuff. Like you think about, that's targeted traffic, and it's niche traffic. Yeah,
we got more traffic for free with this method. In fact, I even used other employees' accounts to help get that immediate engagement up front, so that we would be getting in LinkedIn groups, you'd get emails to those group members about the hottest topic stuff, and we would always be top. So it was like, so that's an example of how easy it was. Now you can't do that easily today. I don't know if you talk much about Glempod, but
well, that's another thing. So it's I know the service. So it's just about getting as much engagement as you can up front. So that's specific to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, I don't know if there's other ones like that across other social platforms. I'm sure there are. So
it's funny, as we keep talking, I realize, actually there's more I should tell you then. But engagement tools are one of the huge value adds that hackers need. So Lempod is an example of one growth hacking engagement tool, but there are so many now. I had 160 Instagram bots at one point back in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So I've experimented a lot with different bots and different engagement tools. But there's a lot. I think there's one called Hubert where it's similar to Buffer in that you can schedule posts.
Yeah.
In addition to that, you're able to say you have a YouTube channel. I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
You have your YouTube channel automate liking and commenting on other people's channels, right? So that you're able to drive more organic traffic back to your. That's one example. I mean, the Twitter and Instagram, similar thing with the follow unfollow bots.
Yeah.
Right, and the commenting and that. I think that opportunity is gone. I don't really recommend that for people anymore.
No, I think that you have to be. I think you have to be careful about where you're spending your time and energy and effort, and you also have to be careful that if you are going to do any of these things, there's a good chance that it goes against the terms of service, so your account could get shut down too. So if it's it's a business account, it's you have to be very careful about this stuff. So
I remember building one Instagram account for a previous company from 0 to 42,000 using a bot.
Yeah.
And, I mean, not just a bot. You need content. You need good content, and you need an audience. But it was a very inexpensive way of creating a real community. In B2B, it's difficult versus business to consumer.
Yes.
Yeah. Because you have multiple people you have to sell to versus B2C, it's just one person you have to sell. Mm-hmm. So and everybody has the potential to shut the deal down in B2B.
Yeah. So
by getting as many different people to buy on, and communicate to them in the platforms that they want to be communicated with.
Yeah.
It's more sophisticated.
When do you think there will be a point where companies that don't understand these tools are just not going to be able to compete?
I think
there's actually a book on this too, by the way, about the ex-director of marketing at American Apparel. I can't remember the name of the book, but it was along this line where he was understanding how with like a fraction of his marketing budget, he was like from the old world of marketing, right, where it cost millions to generate this many impressions, engagement, conversions, whatever, and then all these startups who had no budget had to understand how to game systems to get traction. And even actually, I want to just tell over one more thing while we're recording, because it was a very cool growth hack that he referred to in this book, and I should probably figure out the name of the book before I start quoting, but whatever, it's a really cool point. It was when Hotmail was just launching, and at the end of every Hotmail, I may be mincing this story, but basically it said made with love, or please share, or there was like a silly little like heart with a call to action that was imprinted on the bottom of every single person's email, and and it prompted. And this is like, obviously this is not a bot. This was built by the platform, but just an example of how you're using $0 in marketing spend or ad spend, and that one simple trick that is just like massively scalable and touches so many different people. That basically is what made Hotmail a thing.
Yep, it made it go viral.
Yeah. So I can't remember what the name of the book is or the guy who was speaking, but anyway, I'll have to find it and link it below. But
so yeah, with good engagement tools, I would say Lempod is really fantastic if you're doing business to business and you want to either generate more leads. You're in some way related to the HR field of recruiting, obviously. Mm-hmm. That. But then there's depending on who your audience is, finding out what platforms they spend the most time on, and then figuring out what are the inherent flaws of the platform, right? Like whatever something's strength is, it has a equally powerful weakness, right?
Yeah, because the strength is the reach. So how do you exploit that reach?
Yeah, well, that's part of the strength. But yeah, I mean, you've probably heard this before. You can't have a superpower unless it can be equally used for evil.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I Googled it while we were it's Ryan Holiday, and the book is Why All Marketers Should Be Growth Hackers. And Hotmail put PS what did they put at the bottom of their emails? They put so he was the ex-director of marketing at American Apparel. And at the bottom of each Hotmail said, P.S. I love you, at the bottom of each Hotmail sent out. And right. I guess that was, and there was a call to action to sign up for Hotmail beside that. And that prompted everybody to sign up. And that was a viral, that's just one line of text built into Hotmail. And that built Hotmail into a I don't know when it was sold, if it was for billions, but it was an enormous, obviously, email.
Didn't cost much.
Exactly.
Stood out.
Yeah.
Another interesting one is with, let's say you're doing paid ads for Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
One of the ways to gain Facebook in this way is driving some fake traffic to your ad before you make it an ad, so that the metrics show, hey, this is great content. And you lower your cost for sending out the ad. Right?
Oh, because they now Facebook knows its quality, and now you're caught. Oh, that's very smart. I've never thought about that before, but that's.
There are all these interesting vulnerabilities in their systems, right? Yeah. That are totally, in my opinion, subject to be
exploited.
Here's another useful one. Before we go, do you ever do YouTube ads?
I haven't. No, that's one thing that I haven't taken advantage of.
So for this one's an easy one to remember, and if forever you're like, hey, what was that thing that Darragh said about YouTube ads?
Yeah.
Is again. When you're doing your ads, you set your bid price. You only get charged after 30 seconds. So if they bounce before the 30 seconds, you don't get charged for the YouTube ad.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you obviously want to have it over 30 seconds, whatever your video is. But then every week or two, go in, take the average of what your PPC was.
Mm-hmm.
So your bid price will be like, say, 10 cents.
Yeah.
And for the few days, you will literally spend 10 cents per view. But then after a week or two, you go in and then you take the average, and then you'll notice, it's now the average is 8 cents. So you drop your bid price to 8 cents, and you keep doing this until you're paying 1 cent per view.
That's crazy.
It's a secondary way of getting low cost ads for video, and video is the future.
I agree. Yeah.
If you want to stay on top of SEO for the next couple of years, here's all it is. It's video, it's voice, and it's schema. If you're not familiar with, it's like when you type into Google search and it shows you boxes of information. Now that's schema.
Okay.
So those three things are the future of SEO. If you want to cement a lead right now, I would say immediately do video, because there's just not a lot of well-indexed video. And it's already beating search engine results for search, right? They're showing YouTube videos in regular search now because of this, because it's just the way that we're transitioning. So, probably given a lot to unpack here. So
I think it's very good. I understand most of what you're saying, because I'm a big fan of trying to find ways to, on a budget, reach a massive amount of people. So I think that if people are listening to this and they're just like, what the hell is he talking about? I would say, take it slowly with a grain of salt. Just understand that the ability to reach massive amounts of people, regardless of whether or not you use a tool or you use an algorithm hack, or we use something as simple as looking for, if you want to create content, if you're a content marketer and you want to find content that's going to obviously speak to a lot of people, you look for a question on Quora, you answer that question on LinkedIn. If that question has a ton of upvotes on Quora, obviously it's going to be a popular topic to speak about on LinkedIn. That's violating nobody's terms of service, and that's a very white hat type of hack per se. So it depends on your taste for, or your appetite for, what you want to do, but it's something you should think into. Yes, exactly. Or look into. All right. Thank you, Darragh, so much. That was an incredible interview. We really went into the weeds in a great way. Everything from the psychology of selling, why people buy, human interaction and body language, to best practices, current landscape of marketing, and then the most cutting edge emerging marketing trends, technologies that can help that can help leverage your ability to understand why people buy, the messaging and branding that a company has to create for itself, and then using these two drivers to augment your presence through all of these different marketing technologies, social media technologies, and all the avenues and tools and tricks and growth hacks that we have available today to bring your message to a much wider audience. Darragh provided some amazing insight. So thanks again, Darragh. I really, really appreciated that chat. If you want to speak with Darragh, you can hit him up on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/growth hacker with 2 R's. This has been another sales versus marketing, where we speak with sales, marketing, and business leaders. If you haven't already, wherever you are listening to this podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, Acast, TuneIn, iTunes, please leave a like, a share, leave a comment. Any rating is fine as long as it's a 5-star rating. You can also catch this podcast on YouTube, youtube.com/C/ROI overload. So please leave a like or a comment there as well, and share this podcast with your friends, families, peers, coworkers, anybody who you think would enjoy it. You can also, if you have any people that you'd like to hear on this podcast, please hit me up and I will interview them. You can find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/sdouglasclary, or shoot me an email, sdouglasclary@gmail.com. This has been another Sales versus Marketing. I hope you all enjoyed. Everybody have a great week. Have a productive week, and we will speak again soon. Bye now. Welcome to Scott's Thoughts, where we dissect some of the main points that we just spoke about in the Sales versus Marketing podcast. So this week we spoke with Darragh Grove-White, who is a digital growth guru, mastermind, growth hacker, whatever you want to call it. Outside of the tactical insights that he gave over in our discussion, I wanted to highlight a couple things that are super important. The first is understanding the psychology of selling, understanding human interaction, understanding how to build these relationships. If you can't do that, it doesn't matter how good your product is, how good your marketing is. The most effective way to engage with people and build that relationship is understanding how people function and being able to build that relationship with them. Another point that I really liked that he brought home was the disconnect between creator and distribution from a marketing point of view. So the first point, psychology of selling, was sales. Disconnect between creator and distribution is marketing. So understand that even though you're creating great content, you have to understand how to get it to the masses. So you have to be proficient in your different mediums and your different channels, and your different tool sets. If you know how to growth hack and get your content to a massive audience, obviously you want to maximize your ROI or dollars spent, because you don't want to go broke getting it out there. But just creating it isn't good enough. You have to understand how to get it to the people who care. So obviously there is a huge disconnect between creator and distribution, and that's something just to keep in mind when you are creating content and you are putting it out into the world. So let's see. We got one sales point that I loved, one marketing point that I loved, and then the last point that I really, really liked was his strategy for forward-thinking marketers who are working within organizations that may not be as forward-thinking. If you are trying to manage up, if you are trying to effectively change manage your entire organization and move them in the right direction, that's probably one of the most difficult things to do as a leader or somebody who's trying to affect change within an organization, because you want to get your ideas actioned, you want to get your ideas implemented, and it's very hard to do if your leadership isn't buying in. So the one tip that he gave that was a leadership lesson for us on how to manage up is to launch your initiatives as pilot projects, which removes some of the fear around the initiative that you're taking on. It also allows you to map out KPIs if they haven't already been effectively mapped out, and it shows that and thirdly and lastly, it allows you to showcase how effective your pilot project is. So it just removes some of the fear and some of the apprehension that upper management may have about you as a marketer within an organization trying some new things. So that's another great takeaway. So one sales, one marketing, one leadership, way more that we learned in the podcast. So go back and listen again with a pen and paper if you haven't already. This has been another Scott's Thoughts. Thanks again for listening. Hope everybody has a great week, has a productive week, and we will speak again soon. Bye now.